Welcome to The Big Reset, Marketing and Business Edition, a podcast for entrepreneurs, forward thinkers, and marketing junkies embracing new world business strategies and zigging when others zag. Host Scott Harkey is president and CEO of OH Partners, one of the largest and most decorated creative agencies in the Southwest, which has helped open the door for him to sit down with an array of high-octane guests and personalities, all with credible stories to tell and valuable insights to share. As the advertising and marketing industry continue heading towards new world shifts, align yourself with true leaders in the space and make the Big Reset a weekly habit as you stay one step ahead of the masses in your journey to self-educate, learn, and grow your personal and professional brand.
Welcome. I'm freaking pumped today because I got a good buddy of mine, a longtime homie, goes back a long way, Brian Bogert. And I'm going to give my, how I know you, and then you're going to go into, your thing. You're doing just a ton of shit right now, which I freaking love. Just one of my favorite people. Have helped me a ton in my career, my life. Times I've been down, Brian's been a guy that I've called to pick me up off the pavement. But why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about you? I know you're doing a podcast, you're speaking, you're coaching, just doing a ton of stuff. So I'm gonna butcher the story, but why don't you give the listeners kind of your background, your story?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the story, and then we can kind of hit on some things that I do. I think it's kind of an interesting thing. So I'm actually going to ask you for just a second to bear with me. And anybody who's watching or listening to this, unless you're driving, I just want you to close your eyes for just 1 second. I promise you I'll tell you when to reopen them.
Okay.
So I'm making you do it too.
Okay, here we go.
All right, so I want you to imagine going to a store, having what seems like a really successful shopping trip. You breeze through checkout, you walk out the doors, you feel the sun hit your skin and the warmth of that and the breeze blow through your hair. You start walking over to your car, and as you go to unlock the doors, you turn your head and you see a truck barreling 40 miles an hour right at you with no time to react. Go ahead and open your eyes. That's where this portion of my story begins, brother. Wow. My mom, my brother, and I went to our local Walmart to get just a 1-inch paintbrush. And as we were headed to our car, you probably aren't surprised by this, and anybody who knows me isn't. I've always been excited, a lot of energy, full of life, right? Yeah, I wanted to get home and put that paintbrush to use, so of course I was the first one in the car. This is back in the days before we had key fobs, so I had to literally wait for my mom to catch up, put her key in the door, turn it so we could get in the car and on our way. And as we were standing there, a truck pulls up in front of the store, and the driver and the middle passenger get out, and the passenger all the way to the right feels the truck moving backwards. So he did what any one of us would do, Scott. And he scooted over to put his foot on the brake, but he instead hit the gas.
Ooh. So reverse backwards.
Yep. So a combination of shock and force threw him up onto the steering wheel, up onto the dashboard, and before you know it, he's catapulting 40 miles an hour across the parking lot right at us with no time to react.
Oh, shit.
Now, we were parked in an end spot. So he goes up and over the median in the end spot, up and over the tree, hits our car, knocks me over, runs over me diagonally, tears my spleen, leaves a tire track scar on my stomach, and continues on to completely sever my left arm from my body. So there I am laying on the pavement on a 115-degree day in the middle of August in Phoenix, Arizona. My mom and brother watched the whole thing happen, and they look up and see my arm laying on the pavement 10 feet away. Fortunately for me, my guardian angel also saw the whole thing happen. There was a nurse that walked out of the store right when this took place, and she saw the literal life and limb scenario that was in front of her. And I'm forever indebted to her for making the choice to go into action instead of turning her head and going home. Because she came over and she stopped the bleeding on the wound and saved my life. And then she instructed some innocent bystanders to run inside, grab a cooler, fill it with ice, and get my arm on ice within minutes so that my arm might have a chance to be reattached. So had she not done one or both of those things, I either wouldn't be here with you today, or I'd be here with you today with a cleaned up stump. That's just the reality. So I know you were expecting it to go there today, but I'm sure that nobody else was, okay? You know my story deeply because we've talked about it, but
how old were you? I forget how old you were.
I was 7.
7 years old.
Yeah.
So my son's 9. Holy shit.
So one sidebar before I wrap up that thought. March 6th of this year, my son was the exact age I was the day of my accident. Totally different.
Your son's birthday is March 6th?
No. He was the date.
March 6th was the day.
Was the day, the exact age I was of my accident. I did the math. I'd thought about it for 2 years. So this just happened, and you and I will have a sidebar on that because a whole bunch of crazy things have happened since then. But I know I have a really unique story.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But But what I've also realized in all my time of doing this is that we actually all have very unique stories.
For sure.
What's important is that we pause and become aware of the lessons we can extract from those stories and then become intentional with how do we apply them in our lives. And we all have the ability to do that. And we also all have the ability to tap into the collective wisdom of other people's stories to shorten our own curve to learning. So I'm going to share 2 primary lessons that I've applied in my life, and it'll fast forward to where I am today. So the first is I learned not to get stuck by what has happened to me, but instead get moved by what I can do with it. And the second, I didn't realize until far later. You see, at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, I was the one having surgeries. I was the one going to therapy, physical and occupational therapy, to be able to regain use of my arm and feeling and all those things. But I was also being guided through the process, so I was a little bit in a fog. My parents were not. My parents were intimately aware of the unceasing medical treatments, years of physical therapy, and the idea of seeing their son grow up without the use of his left arm was a source of great potential suffering for them. So they willed themselves day in and day out to do what was necessary, what was tough, to embrace the pains required to ultimately strengthen and heal me. So whether intentional or not, what they did was ingrain in me a philosophy and a way of living, which was to embrace pain to avoid suffering. And I believe when this is done correctly, that's also where we gain freedom. And so it's these 2 concepts that I've applied to my life to not only overcome this unique injury, how my business partners and I scaled our last business to 15 million within the span of a decade, and now how I flipped that on its head as a human behavior performance coach, entrepreneur, people that have individuals and organizations just like you, just like the people listening, become more aware, more intentional, and who they already are, their most authentic selves. I believe this is when magic happens, and the door starts to crack to perspective, motivation, and direction. And that's where joy, freedom, and fulfillment can start to enter into our lives holistically. And so it's these reasons that we're on a mission to impact 1 billion lives by 2045. Because if we can reduce the level of suffering on this planet, allow people to experience joy, freedom, and fulfillment holistically, that's also what's going to allow them to lean into the 2 things that are the glue that binds human connection, which are vulnerability and authenticity. And when that starts to happen, people can not only feel confident and convicted to stand on their own 2 feet for exactly who they are, but know that the world's not going to just accept them, but embrace them for exactly who they are. And that's what's going to leave this world a much better place for my kids, your kids, and our grandkids.
Go back to the pain thing.
Yeah.
You have to embrace pain to get rid of suffering. Is that what I heard?
To avoid suffering.
Yeah.
So let's first understand pain and suffering.
Yeah.
But let's also understand the narrative that the world gives us.
And it's emotional pain and physical pain?
It's emotional, physical,
Have
spiritual.
Have they done studies? Is emotional pain worse than physical pain?
I'm not going to say they have, because I actually don't know or have one to reference, but I believe they have.
Yes.
And I think we know from the human experience side that, of course, that's the case.
Emotional pain
and for mine, I will tell you, and we may have time to get to this today, we may not, right? There's a whole lot of elements to this, but I actually shut off emotional pain when I shut off physical pain, and I didn't realize it until I was in my 30s. So there's a whole lot that's connected to that piece. But
you had a process to be able to shut those off?
Some was intentional, some was unintentional.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but I've learned very deeply the power of intellectual narratives and how much those can shape, even when they're not true, the way we feel. Yeah. Because of the power of them. So
I get that too, because I've done that. In fact, I that's one of the reasons I went to rehab, was because I wanted.
Yeah.
I got really good at avoiding pain.
Of course.
Especially emotional pain, and then I was like, oh shit, I got all these problems. Like I need to go back and feel this pain and go through this process.
So if you don't feel, you don't heal. Period. Right.
Correct.
So that's what it comes to. But what does the world tell us? The world tells us to reduce, eliminate, or avoid pain.
Those damn advertisers.
Damn advertisers. Yeah, jeez. But literally, that's what the world tells us, right? And by the way, it makes sense because it's a natural evolutionary response to when we needed to avoid pain for survival.
Yeah.
Right? It's only in the last 100 years that we don't have to contemplate pain as literally tying to death in every scenario. Right? A cut could kill you 100 years ago. It can't anymore. Right?
For sure.
And so we need to change the narrative, because I'm telling you that the world is wrong. It's not about reducing, eliminating, or avoiding pain. It's about identifying the proper pains that are between where you are today and where you want to be, and starting to recognize those as stepping stones to your success. So let's understand pain and suffering, okay? Pain is defined as short-term, intermittent, a direct cause from something, and alleviated once that direct cause is removed. And then we as human beings screw it up like we do everything else, and we throw adjectives in front of it, right? Like acute and chronic. Now, acute maintains the definition, but chronic inherently changes it, because it implies that it's no longer short-term, and it persists after that direct cause is removed.
Correct.
So let's stop calling that chronic pain. Let's call it what it really is, suffering. Right? We don't want to admit that suffering exists, particularly when it's a direct result of our choices. But the unavoidable precursor to change is acceptance. So until we accept the current state of things, we cannot alter them. And suffering creeps up on us oftentimes because we adapt to it slowly, sometimes until its effects are irreversible. Whereas pain gets lots of attention. So we can embrace the pain of hitting the gym for 30 minutes a day to avoid the suffering of aches and pains of a sedentary lifestyle. We can embrace the pain of a difficult conversation with a loved one or spouse to avoid the suffering of a loveless marriage that's going to end in divorce, or being stuck in a marriage when we want divorce.
That's so true.
Right? We can embrace the pain of the fit our kids are sure to throw by having them put down their mobile devices at the dinner table to avoid the suffering of years of lost meaningful connection and conversation we'll never get back. As business owners, we can embrace the pain of firing our top salesperson, even though they're contributing the most to top line revenue, to avoid the suffering of stagnant growth and losing all of their top talent because they're the greatest cancer in our culture.
Because they're a dick.
Like, the reality of it is this applies to everything in life. And what I believe is that we all must choose our pain or our suffering will choose us.
Oof. And that's why I think for me, the greatest growth I've had, especially the last 2 years, has been about enjoying the process that has pain.
That's right.
Right? Whether it's mountain biking or gym or, tough conversations with my kids to teach them something, or vulnerable conversation with a loved one or a friend, and being okay with, like, this is the process of life, and, like, enjoy this. Like, this is the gift of life, of having these experiences for growth, and not, like, I used to be all excited about, what I would get if I would do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And now I think I've reprogrammed my body, my mind, my spirit to enjoy the process of a video game life, of, like, optimizing it and having the confidence that, like, you're doing stuff.
Yeah.
And I think even, like, Tony Hirsch, I can never say his last name, from Zappos.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
He had a great quote around like, I forget the quote, I posted it, but it was basically like the optimization of life, like perceived growth in your life is what produces happiness. And if you don't have perceived growth, meaning you're not trying, you're not going through the daily process, then there's, like, not growth.
Well, that's true. I mean, I think oftentimes, like, movement is life.
Yeah, it is. That's a flowing, we're ever flowing,
and
like,
growth
people.
doesn't necessarily mean bigger or forward.
Yeah.
Growth can actually mean smaller or backwards or a complete pivot.
For sure.
And so
I hate
that's the
that.
thing too to like pay attention to, right? Is I think it's really movement is the key.
Yeah.
Because it's about not staying stuck. It's about movement, and hopefully movement in the right direction, calibrated over time. But I think, like, to your credit, you talked about, you used to basically numb.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? You used to basically numb. And oh, by the way, what numbing also does is it prevents you from being vulnerable.
Correct.
It prevents you from being authentic.
Correct.
Right? And so everything feels empty.
Correct.
Because if you can't be vulnerable and you can't be authentic, that means one big thing. You're carrying a ton of armor around.
Yeah.
And that armor that we build, we think is protecting us.
For sure.
But what's actually happening is the weight of it is progressively crushing us more over time.
For sure. It freaking broke me.
And just because you can carry it doesn't mean it's not damn heavy. And so what you've done is you've leaned into who you are. You've leaned into recognizing that vulnerability and authenticity is what gives you the feedback in terms of human connection that you desire. And vulnerability and authenticity give you the intimacy in relationships. And I don't just mean sexual, right? But intimacy in relationships, like, because it's real connection.
For sure.
And I think vulnerability and intimacy are closely correlated, both sexual and non-sexual, by the way. Like, that is absolutely key. And that's why I say vulnerability and authenticity are the glue that binds human connection. That's what makes us feel alive. You put in that work because the armor was to protect the wounds.
Yeah.
And because you gave yourself the process to heal the wounds.
Yeah.
You now can be vulnerable because you don't need the armor anymore.
And what I crave is connection.
All of us do.
I think I used to crave stuff. Alcohol, sex, whatever. Like, I thought I craved stuff, and now I realize finally, 35 years into the game, it was like, no, I crave connection.
But here's the thing. You bought into the narrative of the world. Think about it. The external narratives are success.
For sure.
Right? We are born as the most bright, burning, authentic light we will ever be.
For sure.
Ever. You have kids, you know this, right?
Yeah.
Toddlers come out, they're raw, man. They're just like beautiful, like enigmas of
even
just
the ugliest
pure
babies,
energy.
like, you look into their eyes and they're just
pure,
just
like they're real,
amazing.
and they're there, right?
Yeah.
And then what happens? parents, teachers, employers, coaches start layering these things on, which is you should do this, you shouldn't do that, you should be this, you shouldn't be that, you should chase this, you shouldn't chase that, you should make this amount of money, you shouldn't make this amount of money. And all these shoulds, all they're doing is putting layers, right? Which is external armor based on the narratives of the world.
For sure.
And guess what? I did the same thing you did.
Yeah, I remember. We talked about it.
I chased connection, but I didn't know I was chasing connection, so I chased the stuff.
Yes.
Which, by the way, the external narrative of the world is what? What house? What car? What amount of money? What amount of success? What spouse? What lifestyle are you living?
Yeah, for sure.
And we're like deeply ingrained to chase the what.
And it's not, you never can get enough.
It's not about the what. Who should be before what? That's one of the few times I'll use the word should, because should, like I just said a second ago, is a shame-based word, and it implies whatever you're doing isn't good enough.
I had a counselor at Sierra Tucson when I went down to, and he was this old football player. Like, I think he played football for like Alabama, like this old badass, walked without shoes and shit. And I will never forget what he taught me. He said, don't should on yourself.
Yeah, don't shit on yourself.
And I have used that so many times. I've talked to so many young professionals, and they're like, they'll come and talk to me, and they'll be like, I should be doing this, and I should be doing that, and I need to be doing this. And I'm like, time out. I've been you. Don't freaking use that word ever again. Yeah. Like, don't take your own name in vain. Yeah. Like, don't do
it's
that.
True. Because it's automatically shaming yourself.
As I'm shaming them. Don't do that.
Yeah, right. You shouldn't be shaming yourself.
Stop shaming yourself.
But like, then what happens, right? You and I both wake up in our middle 30s.
Yeah.
We've accomplished all the what.
Correct.
Right? We're running with people making multiple 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, many of whom are miserable.
Correct.
Us included.
Correct.
Right? And what I started to realize is it's because I chased the what and I didn't focus on the who.
Yeah.
And when I started to recalibrate with who I am, which is the core of the work I do,
it's so hard though. It is so freaking hard to like, who am I? Like what?
It's so hard, but it's not necessarily a question to answer.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Right? Like that's the thing that I think so many people get stuck on. But when you recalibrate with the who, which is what you've done, the what's in your life become a manifestation of the who.
Correct.
So you're not losing one or the other, because then the what's still happen.
The problem is, you know, the work that I've done and the work you've done, like what I've noticed is when I went back and did that work and I was committed to that, relationships changed and some of them were some senses of loss. Oh yeah. And I'm not just talking about divorce or whatever else. I'm talking about in a lot of ways. And so it's hard. You're like, shit. Like, very hard. You know, and then you know, who am I? And like, what am I doing? I think what's helped me is the visualization of you know, we are like in some ways a lot of water in our body, right? So like we're an ever flowing thing, and the pre-work of trauma is that, okay, I did that. Now, you know, what am I going to be? What do I want to be? And I get to, as an artist, create that every freaking day. Right. And I get to visualize that, and I get to think about who do I want to be and what does the process of that look like. And that's the growth and the art of life of perfecting yourself and knowing you'll never get there, but you can incrementally get better each time. And I think that's, to me, like what I've realized, like that's who I am. I'm growing like a plant, like the earth, like I'm moving towards something that I want, and I get to craft that, and that's okay. Yeah,
but you're spot on. I mean, so this is one of the narratives that we're trying to change. We actually have an entity that's called Who Before What. We're going to be launching some stuff not that long from now, which is really to change this. I mean, think about it. When you meet somebody new, what's one of the first questions they ask you?
What do you do?
Yeah.
I hate that. One. And then two, if you ask somebody who they are, 98% of people answer with what they do. For sure. Well, I do this too. I notice myself doing this all the time, and I've paid attention more recently. And I'll be like, you know, this is Jeff, and I'll give my own little like bio on Jeff. You know, Jeff has a house in Arcadia. You know, Jeff owns his own business. You know, Jeff's a great dad. Yeah. And I put my own like judgments and bios. I put them in this box and I explain them to somebody else. And I'm like, why do I do that?
But it's true.
That's like, so dorky. I hate that.
But we're so conditioned that way.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, if 98% of people answer with what they do, and that's one of the first questions anybody asks, that's not any one of us screwing that up. It's a long pattern in history of a system and a society and a culture that has put values on the what versus the who.
For sure.
It's time. Like, this is the era of who. I believe this is the era of who. We're dawning it.
Do you think we are in an enlightenment like stage?
Whoa,
like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
Like there's an awakening going on.
Huge, globally.
I agree.
I think, you know,
what are the barriers? Like what do we need to do to make this happen?
A lot.
A freaking big question, but
a lot.
I think about that.
You're going to get a privilege here because it's the first time I've dropped this on a show. I've been really blessed because there's a group of people that are trying to figure that out. We have another entity that's called I Am 1 Billion. It's connected to this impacting a billion lives globally in a sustainable way, and not just in one facet. There's multiple silos that have to be contemplated.
100%.
Right now, when we're in a position in this world where everything is so polarized and politicized.
For sure.
Right, and if you think about
marketing, it drives me crazy. I'm not going to get political on it, but you see marketing.
It's 100% marketing.
I see marketing.
It's in everything.
I see marketing happening.
It's in everything
on all sides.
And our world is starving for authentic leadership right now.
For sure.
Because they don't know who to trust.
I don't know. Well,
because of marketing.
There's no media to trust. There's no political figures to trust. There's no employers to trust. There's no brands to trust. I mean, there are some. But
I think as a byproduct of that, there's a lot of people that are waking up to the fact that it's like the only person I can trust is myself and my inner circle.
For sure.
So what am I going to do about that?
For sure.
Right. So many people, I think, operate from a position of feeling like they're a victim in life, or like life is fate, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, there's some fact to that. I mean, our minds process 11 million bits of information per second, but we're only consciously aware of about 40.
That's insane.
So we're largely led by the unconscious. So until we either go through a process to move the unconscious to the conscious, the unaware to the aware, or something forces that on us, we're going to stay stuck, and we're going to feel like we have no influence or control over our destinies. Guess what? The pandemic forced people out of autopilot.
For sure.
It forced people out of autopilot. And there's no surprise that people are being forced for the first time to actually face what their lives really look like. Who's really in it? What are the patterns that exist in it? What are the positive and negative things? That's why mental health is on the rise. That's why suicide's on the rise. 100%. That's why domestic abuse is on the rise. That's why divorce is on the rise. Because so many people just have avoided the pain that is developed into suffering, and all of a sudden when they're forced to look at it, it's like, oh, geez.
Well, that's from all the consumer behavior that I've studied, which is a shitload. And that's my job. You know, so many people are on autopilot. Like they buy the same things, they do the same things, and it's just like.
And for the first time ever in our history, that was not only forced, but it was forced globally.
Yeah.
And it's the first time in history, I think, as well, that we've seen the highest of highest income earners have to be on the same level field as the frontline staff. Because everybody's forced to interact via Zoom.
For sure.
Everybody's forced to have some picture into their home life, whether it's a home office, a living room, a kitchen, right?
Yeah.
It's for the first time that I think CEOs in a lot of organizations have actually seen how their frontline staff operate.
That's a great point. You see in their house and stuff. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's a whole different level of relationship and intimacy and authenticity that was forced on us.
That's insane.
And so I think it's waking up not just the individuals in our world, but I think it's waking up our corporate world in a lot of ways.
For sure.
Because they're starting to recognize that quality of life is something that we'd completely lost.
For sure.
And I think there's a lot of organizations that are starting to realize our people aren't just numbers that help us produce profit. Our people are people. Yeah. Now, as a CEO, I get to see them in their living room with their husband or wife and kids
in the
and life and dogs and mess. And
for sure.
I think there's like a whole different level of empathy and compassion that's being met with the highest level of awareness I think we've had systematically, at least in our lifetime. And so I think we have a real opportunity right now. And that's what I Am 1 Billion, Who Before What, and I Am No Limits, and a lot of the stuff that we're doing is really geared towards, because again, everything that I'm doing at the moment is a vehicle to drive towards a billion lives.
I do want to say this too. I told you I wanted to talk about this even before. I think, again, I meet a lot of up and coming entrepreneurs. I meet a lot of business professionals. And I think what I've realized is maybe part of my purpose, and maybe similar to yours, is like, I'm not this like cookie cutter person that's like got a college degree or like done this or done that. Like I have so many flaws that are so public that like if I can even just be some inspiration or vessel for somebody else that like, first of all, probably has their life together way better than I do. I think that's an opportunity and some part of this podcast. But I think a story that will resonate for people and resonate for me, and I called you out too. I was like nervous for you, man. And I'm a ballsy person, dude. I'll do crazy shit. But I mean, you were making insane money, like change your life money per year in your corporate job, and just killing it. And you were like, Scott, I need to get out of this. I'm gonna like go be a coach. And I'm like, time out, bro. Like, what do you mean? Like, okay, can we do this on the side? Can we build this up a little bit before you leave this job? Like, I think that's a mistake for you. I was totally wrong. I was scared about that for you, but you were like, no. And it's cool to see the growth. I mean, this is what, maybe 4 years ago? Has it been, how long has it been?
When I told you I was leaving, would have been So the decision was made September of 2019.
Okay.
And I executed the buy-sell May 31st last year. So it's been 11 months since I left.
Months. Okay.
It's probably been a year and a half since I told you.
That's insane. I mean, that's insane to me. And to see what you're doing, to see like how fired up you are, to see how it's aligned with your purpose.
Yeah.
The other piece for me that I thought is really cool is I finally figured out that like my job and what I do for work is part of my service quotient, if you will.
Yeah.
Right? Like I can go work and help people. And if I can tie that together and actually do that, then it's like integrated. Like before, I'm like, okay, I go to work, and then now I go to church, and now I'm going to go do my charity work, and it's like these different things,
silos,
right?
Yeah.
And now I'm like, wait a minute, like my work can help people, is charity. We do raise money for charity. We have started OH Cares, and all this shit like can be the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm going off on tangents.
So that point you're making, though, is very legitimate, because that was something that I had to really think through and break down my own belief system on, because I used to be very structured in the way I viewed philanthropic work. Yeah. The altruistic side of me, and how do I fill that? And what do I do? And
here's my little pie chart, and I'm going to give 10%, and I'm going to do that.
I mean, you know that I spent 30% of my time for well over the last decade in the community.
For sure.
Boards.
That's how I met you. Yeah.
Right. Like, and that's something that I was deeply passionate about. That was one of the hardest things that I had to wrap my mind around when I was doing this. Is the only way to build what we're going to build is I had to have 100% focus on it. Mm-hmm. So I had to pull back from stuff that I was deeply passionate about. Yeah. But I've also had to redefine just what you said, right? To me, so much of the work that we do, I mean, here's the thing. To impact 1 billion lives, I'm also very aware that 99.99999999999% will never pay us $1.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm very okay with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Because the reality of it is those that are going to see it, lean into it, invest in themselves, are going to create all the resources we need to substantiate all that impact. Mm-hmm. But to impact 1 billion lives, that is altruistic, that is philanthropic, and some of the stuff that we're structuring right now in some of the other entities is truly going to be that. I mean, all of our apparel, we've got partnerships now with 2 different drop shipping companies. Everything, 100% of the proceeds are going to charity. That's a place I don't need to make the money and the tens of dollars here, right? Like, let's go build the business and do it. So I wanted to hit on that point before I tell you the story.
No, I love it.
We got to where we are, because I think that point's very reasonable, and so many of us, I think, view the world, because of the way we structure it, as very rigid. Yeah. And it's very fluid and integrated. And I've said for a long time I didn't believe in work-life balance. Yeah. I think you set yourself up for success there, because most people view balance in terms of amount of time. For sure. When honestly, it's not about time; it's about attention. For sure. Or impact, or whatever. And so I've said for a long time work-life integration, but it's more than just work-life integration. I think it's life integration. And that's, I think, what you're getting at, because you can do multiple things with similar efforts. It's that whole for sure kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Well,
for me, as long as my purpose is aligned, as long as my company purpose is aligned with my personal both. But I want to get back to something too, and I've talked about this before. Taking off my like spiritual hat and my professional development hat for a second, and talking about corporate America. And I think things have changed so much, and people aren't talking about it, and brands, for a long time, in the last 10 years, like, oh, we need to do charity work. Like, oh, like cause marketing is like a big deal. Oh, this Tom's thing's like for real, right? And so they're doing what maybe you and I were talking about, where they take a % of budget and they focus on that, blah, blah, and it's doing okay. But in this new world, as media consumption has changed so much, and as brand loyalty and what I call brand love has changed so much, like you can't be a brand anymore that does charity or does, influence people's lives or does good things. Like, you have to be a brand that is that.
It's got to be embodied in your culture.
100%, like in everything that you do. And that's so hard. And I think just the traditional way we've done business is changing before our eyes. Of course, media consumption's changed. Of course, consumer habits have changed. I've talked about that. But now, like, this spiritual awakening that you're talking about is here. And I think brands are almost need to be completely retooled in how they operate as a company within, which is, I think, is hard to do as a publicly traded corporate company with existing, processes and procedures and all that.
I think moving a big ship is going to be near impossible for some of the brands.
For sure.
We're going to see some major shifts in the next 10 years because I think that the hard part about creating a big pivot right now is I'm not convinced that brands know exactly where to go.
No, they don't. They have no freaking idea. They're like social media. Like, how do I become relevant?
No feedback or data that's giving them kind of what that looks like. And, we obviously also know there's some generational shifts starting to take place with consumers and how they entering into the market. And so it'll be fascinating to watch. But I completely agree with you. I think that what the sense is I'm getting, and this, by the way, I want to be very clear with a big caveat. I love making a lot of money, and I love the opportunity for people to make a lot of money. It's what are we doing with that matters.
For sure.
And so I just have to give that caveat, because when I say this, I don't mean it to sound bad, but I think that there's a big portion of our society that has gotten really tired of the profits over people element, how our society in some ways has operated.
I agree with that. I do think from I've run a business for a while, and I think you have to do both, though.
You do. That's my point.
Yeah. I think sometimes this altruistic kind of attitude without any business sense, without like some nuts and bolts, like doesn't work either.
100% agree.
Does that make sense?
You and I are completely aligned.
Yeah.
Because I think anytime a pendulum swings to one side.
Yes.
Right? Like it gets.
So I hate politics. It's like, oh, this, oh, that.
It's like, it's harmony. It's whatever you want to call it. But I think that we're on the tail end of this profit side.
Yes.
Largely. There's a lot of great organizations that have had it embedded, but I think what we're starting to see is, now that we see inside people's homes, it's like, okay, well, as organizations, and by the way, when I say profit over people, I'm not just saying just do altruistic work. It's even, we're seeing changes in flex work approaches. We're seeing changes 100%. For people to get higher compensation because they see how their people are living, and they're like, oh man, we can't have them living like this anymore.
Yeah.
We see a lot of generosity and charity between different income scales within organizations. Like that's starting to happen. So a lot of inner stuff that's taking care of our own versus taking care of everybody else. I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the short run, where it's like, let's true up our stuff. Let's focus on our foundation, make sure our people are good. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It's no different than in a marriage, showing up as who you are. You're going to be the best version of yourself, but the marriage doesn't work.
I agree. I also think that, so I'll give you an example. 1/3 of our workforce we surveyed, everybody said, we're not coming back ever.
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit.
Yeah,
One third of our workforce said they're literally not coming back to work. 175 employees. I think there will be people that have earned trust and accountability and get it, and they're going to be in a good spot. I think there's going to be some other people. I'm not talking about our company, by the way. Let me be clear. I think there's going to be some people that think that benefits and when you come to work and where you come to work and where you work are going to be like something that everyone just gets.
Right.
And that's not going to, in my opinion, talking to a lot of business owners, that's not going to be the case.
No, I don't think it is.
If you're
for small to mid-sized.
Look, if you're entry level, like you might need to come to work every day.
Yeah.
Look, if you're, mid to senior level and you're killing it and you have a ton of value and you're taking care of kids or whatever, or you maybe you don't need to come in at all.
And by the way, a lot of what the examples I was talking about would be what I would more call corporate America.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? In the entrepreneur, business owner, small to medium sized business type stuff.
Yeah.
We're talking a slightly different game here.
No question. They're going to have policies and all this shit.
And so I think turning the big ship there, you did say something earlier that I want to make sure that we hit on, because I know you wanted to talk about this in here. And it was like this process of my transition, and we got
I know it's ADD brain. Yes.
No. I, by the way, I'm right there too. I see shiny objects up there. I'm getting
totally cool.
Distracted. Yeah. But I deeply resonate with what you talk about, because here's the thing: like, I am as imperfect as any person positioning themselves to be perfect.
For sure.
Right. Like, I have so many flaws, and I genuinely believe that. What we're doing is trying to normalize conversations around stuff that we typically don't talk about.
I love that.
I think a lot of suffering comes from what's left unsaid.
I totally agree with that.
And so, I'm kind of an open book.
Yeah.
And I mean, geez, I just dropped some bombs in the last 2 weeks on some stuff that's real time that we're dealing with. And so I want to share this story, this transition, because it is something that I think people can learn from.
Love it.
And it's not just about me, it's about my partner.
Okay,
It's really the dynamic that led to it. So I'm going to start a little further back, because, I've always been that guy that said that I never want to be the husband and father that provided everything for his family, but woke up 25 years later and none of them were there in the relationship.
Yeah.
We had our son, and 6 months in, I realized that I was still burning the candle at both ends, and I had done nothing to adjust my life. So providing everything for my family financially means nothing if I'm not there for leadership, love, security,
For sure.
empathy, compassion, all of the above, right? The structure, the stability, the strength. And so it was the first time in my life that I didn't feel like I had the people in my life, nor did I feel like I had the skill set or intellect to figure it out myself. So I hired my first coach. And
Is this the coach I met? What coach was this?
This was Ben Newman.
Yeah, love Ben. Yes, I have his book. I did a conference with you early on, Ben.
Ben, I hosted one early on.
It was that conference. Like I wrote like a whole plan for my life, and it was amazing. Yeah.
Good stuff, and good guy, right? And
awesome, dude.
So I ended up connecting with him because he had relevance and credibility.
Totally did.
And when we get in, literally, it was a month into working with him. He's like, "Bogert, you got to be doing this." I was like, "What are you talking about, dude?" And he's like, "You need to be coaching, you need to be speaking." I said, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Dude, you build people and you build businesses." He's like, "In your story, personally and professionally," he's like, you have context, you have relevance and credibility. You understand? He's like, "Just do it." And I was like, "Yeah, whatever, buddy. I'm paying you a lot of money now. Tell me how great I am.
Yeah.
Tell me to figure out this other stuff."
Yeah.
Which he did, right? And he helped, and I'm forever indebted for a lot of the things that I've embedded in my life. He trickled it for about 9 months. And the world sent me a sign that I couldn't refuse. So what I'm grateful for in there is he told me what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear, and he trickled it despite the fact that I didn't see it in myself. He saw it in me.
That's cool.
Okay. Fast forward a little bit. I opened up the business 6 years ago. I was coaching and speaking. I had to cap number of coaching clients and number of speaking events every single month because I was so significantly invested, time, energy, money, emotions, everything in the other business that we were building. And so this was one of those things where I just was dialed and it was set there. I had some other health stuff a couple of years back. I'm good now. I'm squared away. But after the tail end of that, my wife and I went away the summer of 2019. And it was one of those weekends that like mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, like brother, like we were one. We were just connected. And
Where'd you go?
We went up to Savannah, actually.
Okay.
North.
Okay.
We did like meditation.
That's cool.
It was all like a really spiritual
Love it.
experience
Yeah.
together. And we're driving back to pick up the kids, and Ashley leans over in the car next to me, and she says, "How'd you feel if you didn't have to go to the office on Monday?" And I was like, "Man, that's a pretty loaded question."
Yeah.
I was immediately flooded with fear. I got goosebumps. I was like, "What? Where is she?" I was like, "It's a loaded question. Why don't you tell me more?" She said, "Well, I think you let this last health stuff allow fear to enter into your world in a way that I've never seen. And I think you've convinced yourself that we need the status, we need the money, we need the prestige, we need the financial security." She said, "I'm here to tell you we don't. I don't care if we live in a cardboard box on the corner. What we need is 100% you, and we don't have 100% you." She said, "I also know that as you've been coaching and speaking, that's where you're meant to be." She said, "And I don't think you're even scratching the surface of your potential, nor do I think you're having the impact on the world that you want." She said, "There's nobody on this planet I'd rather take a bet on than you. We've already taken a big bet on you, and it paid off. Why don't we double down on that bet and go all in?" And she said, "Because there's nobody else I'd rather do it with." I mean, I'm getting chills.
I'm getting. She's an awesome.
It's not lost on me the strength it took and the courage it took for her to push me.
Ashley's a dope person.
She was clear as day, way more clear than I was in that moment. She threw a dart and hit the bullseye.
Oof.
And I had to go through a process over the next 3 months of really unpacking what does that mean? Like, what is the root of my fear? How true is this? Have I convinced myself that I'm here? And this was on the tail end of working through a lot of issues with my shame, which I didn't understand shame and how much that impacted me. And I'll give 2 quick things and then I'll wrap this piece up. But shame, and Brene Brown outlines it best.
I love Brene.
It's I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough.
Yes.
And then when you shut that down, you're ready to go to battle, and you show up in the arena ready. It's like, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
Right? It's who are you to live beyond that limit? Who are you to go do something big? Who are you to who do you think you are?
100%.
Everything major I had ever done in my life, I felt the need to apologize.
Yeah.
And I literally pulled the throttle back in my life because I didn't want to feel shame by doing big things. And I've always done big stuff. And by the way, I've done a lot of big stuff that you know about that many people don't, that they'll never know. And
For sure.
Cool stuff. But I never felt I could celebrate that, own that, or like lean into it. And I was pulling the throttle back. So I started to look at a few things.
That's interesting, though. I think a lot of people. I think a lot of people don't know they can relate to that, but they can relate to that. Is I think we're not afraid of. At least for me, I'll speak for me. I'm not afraid of failing anymore. I'm afraid of succeeding.
Yeah, it's a fact.
Because what does that say about me? Like, who am I? Like there's demons in my head like want to push me down a little bit. Yeah.
That's why shame is so damaging, because it's the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing. It hits you on both sides, from the bottom and the top.
100%.
That's why most people don't see it, because it shows up as fear,
It's sneaky.
stress, scarcity, right? Like perfectionism, defensiveness. Like it shows up as all these other things. So we put a label on it that's not shame, but shame is toxic.
For sure.
And so I had to look at that. The 12 months leading into that conversation, I'd lost 6 men I knew to suicide.
What?
Yeah. Right? And so I looked at this, and I'm processing all these things. And I look at my kids, and I think to myself, and I had to think through regret minimization theory, which Bezos popularized, which is that people on their deathbed regret the things they never did, not the things they didn't fail. I knew what my life looked like.
Interesting.
That was the easy button.
That's the
easy button.
That's the Bezos theory. I haven't heard that. That's cool.
I don't think it's Bezos' theory. He popularized.
That's cool.
But I didn't want my kids to see me hit the easy button. And if I was in a position to change or save someone's life, what am I doing over here schlepping insurance?
Yeah.
If I believe that my gifts, my calling is to help people in this way, and I've only through the last year discovered those gifts even more.
Yeah.
The reality of it is, it's like, what am I doing? I was out of alignment, and I didn't realize how out of alignment I was. And the further away I get, the more like myself I feel.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's also allowed my wife and I to see patterns that were created in our life as a result of the 15 years I spent in risk management insurance.
Yeah.
We're now unpacking them.
Yeah,
right? So it's caused pain. I had to embrace the pain.
Yeah.
Right? Of taking a risk, of chasing what it was to avoid the suffering of being stuck and not ever knowing what I was capable of. And right now, my wife and I are having to embrace the pain of unpacking stuff that we never saw. Of working through the process of patterns that weren't our fault, but are certainly our responsibility.
Yeah.
And now we have an opportunity to redefine what the rest of our lives look like. And so that's what we're doing. And man, I haven't looked back.
That's crazy. I remember when you talked to me one time, and I'll never forget this. And it was definitely a low point when I was battling some things. You said, I want you to go in your bathroom and I want you to write on the mirror, I am worthy. Yeah. I want you to take a picture. So I did that. And
I remember that.
And it was horrible. I'll never forget. It was horrible because I'm looking at myself in the mirror with like this, I am worthy. And I just felt like shit. I couldn't embrace it. And I felt like a loser for doing it. And I actually thought it would make me feel better. It actually made me feel worse, but it helped me because I realized in some weird way that like, I don't need to have shame. Like it almost like stung me the other way. Cause I saw this picture and I'm I got out of bed. I was probably hungover and I take a picture of myself. Like I have my shirt off and it's like, I am worthy. And I'm just like, what is this? Right. And I've literally contemplated like getting a tattooed on my arm, like on my wrist right here, just to like think about it. Cause shame is so sneaky. It is so sneaky. And I've seen a lot of people deal with it. I've been in like group therapies that dealt with it. I've had friends that commit suicide over this, and it like creeps into you, but I've never seen it like creeping in from the top down. Like for me doing podcasts or like, I'm like, what are you an influencer? Like, dude, you suck, man. Like, who do you think you are? Like, come on, bro. Like,
but that's the thing. Like it is unbelievably damaging. Right. And the reason I had to do that is because it's like the words I am are the two most powerful words in the English.
For sure.
Whatever follows I am follows you.
It does.
And so, it's an answer to who are you question. That's something I learned from Ben Newman, right? Like you can answer
Ben's great at this. Yep.
Who you are or who you want to become. Both are equally powerful. And so, I am statements are a big part of what it is because it helps you envision and embody states and traits about yourself that you need to have or who you want to become. And it drives that behavior. Shame, the thing is, you never escape it.
Never.
It will be an adversary always in pursuit.
Yeah.
So you have to be vigilant in those moments to start to recognize what happens, right? We talked earlier too about how so many people think that like they're stuck because of the wrong strategy or tactics in their life. Mm-hmm. The more work I do in this space, the more I just definitively believe that is wrong. Mm-hmm. Strategy and tactics will only get you so far. And by the way, strategy and tactics that I applied in my life, you applied in your life.
For sure.
We've both had success. We've both had lots of fun. We've both done lots of things, but it will only get you so far. What truly keeps people stuck is a combination of emotional triggers, behavioral patterns, and environmental conditioning. They keep you in that self.
Say that again slower for me.
Emotional triggers.
Yes.
Behavioral patterns. And environmental conditioning. And so shame, you have to understand it through all three lenses. You have to understand the root of shame, where it came from, where it's patterned in your life, where and how it shows up. what are the triggers, right? What are the things that actually make you feel shame, right? Behavioral patterns, how do I respond to those triggers? But to be able to do that, you also have to be really in your body and really aware. You have to start to understand, like, for example, I care deeply about being a great husband and a great father. So anytime that's in question, it sparks my shame. And it sparks my defensive element of shame. Because my wife might say something to me, and I can rattle off the last 15 things I did in the last 5 days that I did for her and for the kids, which, oh, by the way, serves no purpose. Because that's not really what we're getting at. But my defensiveness causes me to do that, right? And it puts a little bit of oomph behind it, which causes an issue when there probably wouldn't have been one otherwise. Well, that's an emotional trigger and a behavioral pattern that, again, my wife didn't create.
Correct.
And it's my responsibility to fix.
Isn't it amazing when you understand your triggers?
It's insane.
Like it's not about, like, for me, I've realized it's not about, getting rid of triggers.
No.
It's just about like, oh, here's my trigger. It just hit. I know what's happening right now. I need to do X, Y, and Z now. Like, not I need to, but like, okay, here's what, like, now I can process and how I can move forward and just accept it. Like, I have abandonment issues, or I have sometimes, issues for whatever reason. And like, this obviously triggered that. Makes sense. It's not about this issue. Yeah. It's about some past shit that I have. And that's okay. It's made me who I am. And it's made me, in a lot of ways, great. And the triggers come up, and now I can just deal with it. So many people I don't think even understand what their triggers are.
And I think what's difficult is most people don't start to understand, like, okay, once I had shame, I started to be able to understand, and this is where I started. I understood how shame would show up in my body. Meaning, what was the visceral reaction I got?
Yeah.
What were the external and internal manifestations of shame? Because if I could know what that looked like, and they look a little different depending on what shame is being triggered for me, by the way.
Yeah.
And so I had to really focus on just being where my feet are, being in my body, and really paying attention. Because once you understand how it shows up in your body, then you can start to ask yourself the question, is it true? Right? And you can understand, like, is my snapping reaction because I'm getting crap about loading the dishwasher wrong? Or is it because of how my grandpa looked at me when I was 6?
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Like, it really does start to help separate. So you have to understand where you're at in your body. But I think what starts to free people is to truly do the work long enough to get to the root of it. Saying that you have shame doesn't matter if you don't know where it came from.
It sucks. That's the hardest part.
Right? Because it feels like you can't escape it. Once you start to understand it and understand the root, that doesn't mean you can fix it. Yeah. But it allows you to take judgment out of the scenario, because one of the things you said is like, I am worthy. You immediately felt bad about yourself. Self-awareness is great, other than the fact that a lot of times self-awareness makes people more self-aware of all the ways they should be judging.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? And so we've got to be able to shift to future focus and objective around what can we do now that we know these things. So I'll give, right now, I'll give you an example. This is a real-time blind spot that I've only recently become aware of. I've been angry for a long time.
Huh. You don't seem like an angry guy.
Because 95% of my world, anger doesn't show up. Because of the way I've built my world. But I've recognized that because I'm dealing with some stuff right now that I've had to unpack that. It was a hard thing for me to admit.
How do you deal with an angry guy? Yourself or somebody else?
I had to understand the root, first of all. But it's no different than shame. How does it show up in my body? Where are my triggers? What environments contribute to it? Where and how am I able to, like, have it be effective or not effective in my life? Like, you have to ask yourself.
What are you angry about?
Well, so that I'm not ready to talk about on the podcast.
Okay.
I figured it out in a matter of 3 days.
You figured it out. It took 3 days.
Well, I had a really unique experience that concreted it for me. That wouldn't have happened otherwise.
And was it buried inside you?
Very deep.
Ooh. And I mean, you've done all this work and you just discovered this recently?
That's why I'm saying it. Because
that's insane.
Because there is no final destination.
That is so true.
It's only a constant evolution of self. I believe that anger is the last piece that's truly a negative emotion that's been holding me back. And it's not holding me back majorly, but it's holding me back from some of the things I care most about in this world.
Well, one thing is you say that I've noticed, I did this. I've seen other people who have gone through, therapy and whatnot. And I think therapy is great. It helps you find root cause stuff, right? And it sucks. But I think a lot of times then I notice I got into this pattern. I see other people get in this pattern of like the victimization of that negative experience that you've found some root cause issues with, and it's having triggers in today's life. Like, how do you
you get past that? Like, or like, is that okay to have some victimization and then it's just a process you have to go through? Or do you quickly need to like think about like, like this happened for a reason it's made me better who I am? Like, how do you emotionally process that as you like find these root cause shit?
I think you can imagine that this is
loaded
so
question.
Complex. It's extremely loaded. But I think that
asking for a friend.
I think it's really getting honest with yourself.
Yeah.
About what is true. And that doesn't mean what is true just by a stat perspective. What is my truth?
I'm glad you said that, because I don't believe there's black and white, like true and not true. I hate that kind of like, what, is this true in this Bible? Is this not true? It's like, it's all a matter of perspective. Like, is this a chair or not? Like, I don't know, maybe not.
Ryan Holiday in The Obstacle is the way.
I love Ryan Holiday
quotes, and so it's the way I view it, but the way he says it is perfect. And I'm probably going to butcher it, but
it's fine.
There is the event that happens.
Yes.
And the story we tell ourselves.
100%. Yeah.
That's truth.
And that's okay.
And I think that's completely okay. And so that's why I say perspective points us at what's important too, because I think oftentimes seeking other perspective helps us better understand our own. But I think a lot of people have a hard time moving through it. What I'm starting to believe is I think there's a lot of folks who don't feel like they were ever able to own their truth in the time that the root happened. And it's, again, suffering created by what was unsaid.
Correct. And then you're cycling yourself suffering and living it over and over and over again, this suffering that happened.
So that's the simplistic nature, by the way, of my anger, and I'm not going to give details on what it is.
Yeah.
But it was stuff that I felt that went unsaid. Right? Now, why? I don't need to talk about right now, but the point is that's what most people don't do. They don't ask that additional question. They don't really understand, like, what is my truth? What is truth? And then being able to recognize that we don't have to have our emotions tied up in it anymore. What we need to do is shift from trying to just understand why this happened and where and how it shaped us. And that's where we have to go future focused and determine what are we going to do about it. That's why I say I learned not to get stuck by what has happened to me, but instead get moved by what I can do with it. Because the reality is, for me, transferring my pain into purpose allows me to process. So part of the reason it's also really easy for me to be an open book is it's a part of processing. It's a part of me owning my truth.
For sure.
It's a part of me owning my faults.
I agree with that.
Right? And part of it's accountability, part of it's ownership, part of it's living on our own truth. And then also making sure, for me, the last thing I ever want is for anybody to believe that anything I do is fraudulent, misrepresented, not authentic. So that means I've got to own my gifts. I've also got to own my worst things about me. And I believe genuinely, like, we are all a complex mixture of good and bad.
For sure. Light and dark.
We've all done a lot of bad things, but that doesn't mean that who we are is bad.
Correct.
Our world tells us otherwise.
100%. And I think, as I'm hearing this, I think that's why community is so important. I think that's why, as I learned about 12-step, and the process of why it's been the most successful thing for people to overcome addiction. It's why, I have some form of a community group that I meet with monthly in a kind of 12-step kind of process. So like YPO, for example, it has, every month I have 9 people I meet with. We hold each other, we talk about very intimate, detailed stuff we wouldn't tell anybody. And it's a way to empathize. It's a way to connect. It's a way to find solutions of your own problems through somebody else's problems that is showing up in some similar way. I'm just such a big advocate in some sort of community group that you meet with, that you share deep shit with, that you learn from. And I've literally for the last 5 years have had some form of that. You and I had a group like this before. So I just challenge everybody, whether it's a formalized group like a YPO or EO, or it's a 12-step group or a church group, like anything. Like, I think this could be one big way we can change. Literally this world is supporting each other through community.
I couldn't agree more. And like we talked about earlier, we're hardwired for connection.
For sure.
And I think what community does as well is it allows people to simultaneously get a push, a pull,
yes,
and feel permission.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, again, I think so much suffering comes from what's left unsaid.
For sure.
Many people don't know necessarily what needs to be said. Or
Yes.
even if they do, they don't have the words for it.
Yes.
But hearing someone else say something that they relate to, something that resonates for them, gives them a push, a pull, and permission, because it puts words and reality to how they feel.
Yes.
And it gives them permission to vocalize it if they know they can. And those are ways that we start to restore. That's where we also get connection. That's where we can start to move forward. The problem is we just don't say a lot of what needs to be said.
Mm-hmm. I've had moments like where I've been very nervous to say something, and this actually this could be a great sales tactic too. Anyone in sales, like if you ask permission for something to say something vulnerably, like you say, hey, can I ask like a crazy question? Or like, there's been a sales tag of mine forever. Like, hey, can I be vulnerable? And it's true, it's authentic. And I say the elephant in the room.
Oh, always.
And it just changes the dynamic of a meeting. And it could not even be a sales situation. It could be in a one-on-one situation. It could be in a date situation. When I was dating, it was like, can I ask the question I'm not supposed to ask? Because like, I want to get this awkwardness out and this barrier to connection out of the way. That's right. And it works so well. And people will be like, and even other stuff, like I'll say things that like we're not good at, like as an agency, like at times, or things that we've struggled with. And people are like, oh shit, like you're not just trying to sell me something.
But when you own it, I mean, that's real, right?
Yeah.
So we had a meeting with a CEO of a credit union for a multiple six-figure coaching and engagement opportunity with the organization. She's very proper.
Yes.
Right? She's
yes.
been at the organization for 35 years.
I'm like picturing this. Yes.
And she's this small, unassuming, but really powerful, strong woman. I love this woman.
Yes.
Felt this connection immediately. It says it what it is.
Yeah. Love it. Love it.
I show up in a t-shirt, my mohawk, my mustache, and I'm the only one that isn't a formal corporate executive.
Oh, yeah,
right?
For sure.
And I did that in quotes. Hopefully some people will understand why.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
The point is I will coach, but I also won't coach in certain scenarios. And so my biggest thing was like, I went in and I asked all the questions to figure out.
You're qualifying them.
I qualified her before I even went in to ask any questions.
For sure.
Which she appreciated.
Yes.
Because she's like, everybody else is just trying to sell this.
Yeah.
And then
you're trying to matchmake.
100%.
Yeah,
and
I do the same thing.
And I was like, I'm not sure I'm the right guy.
Yeah.
These are all the reasons why.
Yeah.
But I need to understand this. And then once we started to work through it, but that's saying what needed to be said. Well, guess what? She wants us to work for her.
Yeah, for
we
sure.
also happen to be the most expensive.
Yeah.
She's waiting the longest for us because we don't have capacity for a month and a half until they can get started. So we may not get the deal. I think we're going to, but the point is like I didn't go in there with an agenda to sell anything. I went in there to figure out if and how I could help.
For sure.
And I wanted to know, is this in alignment with me?
100%.
And oh, by the way, is this going to help or hurt us impacting 1 billion lives in the next 25 years? Because anything that's potentially going to take away from it, anything that will take away time, energy, attention, or resources, we're not going to do. We've already stepped over a number of other opportunities just like this because they didn't fit.
If I would have learned this at 25, it would have been a game changer for me because I wanted every deal and like I tried to make things work.
Scarcity versus abundance.
I 100% agree with you. I want to leave people with that because I think that is awesome. Just thanks for coming on. I know we've been trying to do this for a while. Congrats on all your success. I'm going to continue watching it. I love you like a brother, and I was so excited for you to come on and share this moment with me. So thank you.
You too. We'll have to do it again. It's always fun.
We're going to.
Stuff with you, and man, thank you for creating a platform for me to put good into the world and pour my soul into your audience. I mean, that's what it's about, man. Changing lives, and I know that's what you're all about. So.
Thank you, bro. Appreciate it. All right. If you like this, tune in, share it, do whatever you do on social platforms or whatever. But just thanks for watching. Appreciate you.
You just experienced the Big Reset, Marketing and Business Edition. New episodes of our highly engaging series drop every Wednesday, while past sit-downs are available to stream or download in our archive. For more, follow your host at Scott Harkey on Instagram. And for more on OH, check out ohpartners.com.